David, nice to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So let's talk about this because Aegis was sent to me. It got when after I turned 50, and it got my attention immediately because I got to read story after story after story of people who were doing amazing things, and it wasn't about their final chapter or even their next chapter. It was about another one of their chapters in life. Can you talk to me a little bit about the vision behind it and the mission going forward?
Yeah, well, we started about 6 years ago because what we saw was everyone that was our age was seen as like a health problem in need of a solution. And I thought, well, why are you medicalizing me? I don't feel like I need that. And ultimately, infantilizing people by saying, like, be very scared, you're not capable of things. And I thought, this is just not right. I don't feel like this. And nobody I know feels like this. So really what we need to do is to present positive role models and just say, like, hey, this is what people are really doing. This is what they look like. You don't have to live like this if you don't want to, but if you do, this is on the menu now.
Well, I love you putting it on the menu because I've been a journalist for 20 plus years, and the only way that we learn is from the stories of other people, right? That
That's
inspires
right.
us, that teaches us, that guides us, and that was why I got into that business originally. And then at some point in the business, and I was maybe in my early 30s, one of my mentors who sat next to me said, "When you get to be a certain age, a woman of a certain age, mid 40s, closer to 50, they don't want you in television anymore." And so I lived a long, early part of my 30s into early 40s thinking that my time had run out, I was going to peak soon, it was going to be all over, because I think at some point there was that mindset, and even today there's a lot of people that show that mindset that you're moving into the greener pasture somewhere else. And I don't see that in any way right now. I interviewed Norma Kamali not too long ago, and she's got more
Yeah.
energy than I do. She can do workouts and splits, and she just wrote a book called I Am Invincible, and I think she is. And I just see people that make me so inspired to share their stories more than anything else. And you're certainly somebody doing just that.
Yeah, we love Norma.
She's
Norma's
awesome, right?
Norma's one of our friends. She's amazing. Love her. Yeah, and you're entirely right that some people they see our name and they're like, oh, you're fighting ageism, and I'm saying, no, I'm not. I'm not fighting anything. All I'm doing is I'm just saying this is what's going on out there, presenting stories and letting people make their own conclusions from that. My feeling is that regulation and politics and all that is sort of like that comes later. First you have to move the culture moves, and then the rest of it follows. And what moves culture is story, and probably the most important part of story are the pictures. What does it look like?
Yeah.
And that's how we look at it.
And the pictures are just amazing because you look at those immediately, and it brings you right in. What is your background, and how did you come to doing this 6 years ago?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have an advantage in that area. I had a, had a pretty rocking career as a photographer for about 35
Thought
years.
you
So,
might.
so used to live in Paris. I lived in New York for 25 years. I've done maybe a dozen covers that are the New York Times Magazine. I've worked for all the Condé magazines and the Hearst magazines, like 1,000 advertising campaigns. So I have that skill set. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I see it well. But you really do take the pictures and make them tell the story before you even read the story, and that's
Yeah.
that's the talent of it, and that is the gift. Who has who stands out in your mind? I mean, I feel like I don't know if it's a fair question to ask because I always hate those kind of questions when I'm asked those myself. But is there anybody in particular that stands out to you that you say, okay, this person and this person inspired
Oh,
me, but that
Tamsen,
person
don't do it to
really
me.
inspires me?
You're asking me to pick my favorite child.
I
That's
know.
not
You don't
fair.
you don't have to do it. I just think you just have some incredible stories. And I didn't know if there was somebody that really
Well,
stood out to you in particular that said, I got to keep going.
they're all great. That's why we choose them. This week we're working on Mariel Hemingway. So,
Wow.
Mariel
Nice.
has an awesome story, and we had our friend Carrie Otis do the interview because they have
Wonderful.
a lot of commonality there, and they're both awesome people. And they're kind of well known, but we do a lot of people who aren't well known because we feel like there's value in celebrity because it brings attention, but
Sure.
there's also like a lot of celebrity culture out there, and one of the things that we want to say is that you don't have to be a celebrity or a billionaire or any of that to live like this. It's more of an attitude.
It really is an attitude, and I think that it's also an attitude that people are starting to appreciate a little bit more. I don't know if in traditional forms of media, anybody wanted to see somebody of 50 plus, 40 plus at some points, on the cover of a magazine, and now we're seeing ad campaigns, and we're seeing commercials, and we're seeing things that are people like us out in the forefront, and that's really nice to see in more traditional forms of media.
That's right. I mean, you're talking about half of the population, so it's not a smart idea to marginalize half of the
Right.
population. That's just not good business. That's just not good smarts, right?
It's incredible to me to see where people are working into their late 70s, 80s. My father worked into his late 70s, and he didn't want to retire. He has more energy than I even know what to do with him. And he's on moving on. And I see a man that was my 50-year-old father is now my 81-year-old father, and I think he's done it from mindset, 100% mindset. I can't say that my dad goes running every day or he eats perfectly, but I can say that he believes, here his age doesn't matter. And I see him doing tremendous things right now. So I think it's beautiful that you're presenting the stories and moving people forward. Do you think that you've seen a lot of people respond differently or change their perception if they've read the Ageist or listened to your podcast, Super Age?
Well, that's what they tell us. I don't do
Good.
any follow up on that, but that's what they say. Yes.
What do you think is the topic that is super important right now? I know we're hearing a lot about brain health,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of research that's out there right now. Obviously, wellness is huge, but brain in particular, there seems to be a lot of focus on at this point, which I'm encouraged by.
Well, yeah, I think that's a huge topic. And, we've learned a lot of the people that we interview, especially on my podcast, are people who are experts in that field. Dr. Rudy Tanzi at Harvard, some of the people at Stanford, Morgan Levine, people who are really at the forefront of science and talking about brain health and, the interaction between brain health and gut health, the importance of exercise, the importance of community. I was on the phone with Dr. Michael Reuser, who's the head of wellness at the Cleveland Clinic. And he said, okay, here are the top 20 things you can do to live a long time and live well. The first three are community. It's like community, community, community. So the effect of isolation, like from the pandemic, Dr. Ronnie Stangler, the Aspen Brain Institute, said that the last year was, as a year, because of COVID and the isolation, was an epigenetic risk factor for health and especially for brain health, because
Sure.
we weren't getting that level of interaction that we normally have.
What are some of the other studies that you're seeing out there, or are there different places that we're going now that we're seeing how much longer people are living? I know there was the Midas study that was done about midlife some time back, because there's not so much there has not been so much focus on midlife. Tons of studies on younger, tons of studies on much older, but when you hit this midlife, we've certainly changed. My parents were not like we were. My mom died at the age of 50, so I never had the ability to see what that midlife looked like for a woman, which was a little tough, obviously, because I didn't kind of have that roadmap. But when we're looking at this midlife area, we're seeing more and more research being done to figure out how we think, how we stay well, how we start preventative measures much earlier than waiting until we have an actual problem.
Well, I think one of the things, Tamsen, is it's very much of a barbell situation. You have one group of the population that either feels they don't deserve to live well or they can't live well, whatever. And then you have another portion of the population that's very interested in living better and living longer and living healthier. The people who don't believe that they can or that they deserve are people that we try and reach, and we say, this is not so hard. It's, there's like 4 or 5 fairly simple things you do. You're going to extend your lifespan and your health span another like 10 or 20 years. Some people don't believe that. Then there are the people that do. And, I think that really, I'm 62, and people, 20 years ago, someone my age, have thought of as being a really exceptional human being. I'm not a particularly exceptional human being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know, tens of millions of people that are just like me. As we look forward, though, I think what's happening here, if you look at the statistics, the fastest growing group in the population are people over 80.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because, we're taking better care of ourselves. What I'm hearing from the big brain science people I know, we're about to live a whole lot longer and healthier. So, you and I were, you're 50. Congratulations.
Thank you. I feel like I've arrived.
You've arrived. As I said, you finally reached a respectable age, Tamsen. Congratulations.
I can't wait to use your line on somebody else, by the way. I love it. I will be.
My friend Beatrice Oakes told me that. I can't take credit for that one.
Well, I'm stealing it from her too then.
So, really what we're looking at, if you can keep your organ systems in fairly good order for the next 10 years, you're probably going to live well a lot longer. And that's going to have an unbelievable effect on our economy. In 10 years, there's a very good chance we're going to have to cut taxes, because if you think about it, if somebody's 90 and they're starting new businesses and they're out there consuming and they're producing, that produces a lot of commerce, and It's going to throw off a lot of economic activity. Of course, I think we're going to have to figure out, Social Security and like the ages and stuff like that need to get sorted out in some way. But I think that midlife may go to like 90 or 100, and then advanced life is something beyond that. And you hear these sort of, the sort of stuff they put on the front of the New York Times or the Guardian, or and it's just like clickbait stuff about like, oh my God, the demographic time bomb, this is terrible. No, it's not terrible. It's awesome. So you think about like people are doing all these things for longer. That's good. Mm-hmm. So economically, that's good. But from a wisdom and learning standpoint, you're going to, as a human race, we're going to be taking a body of knowledge much further into the future than had ever happened in the past. And I think that's super exciting. If you have somebody who's 90 and they have the brain and the body of what a 40-year-old used to be, mm-hmm. and so think about that as you get older. What happens is you have more experience. So your hard drive gets bigger, and you get much better at pattern recognition. So you're able to see things from sort of a whole. Now, I have no idea how an 80-year-old or a 90-year-old thinks, but I know how people our age think. And if we mm-hmm. expand that, I'm just thinking about like that level of wisdom brought to bear on a whole range of human endeavors. As I tell people, if you want like some coding done or something like that, hire yourself a 25-year-old, because they're not really that concerned with the ramifications of what they're doing. They're just able to like drill down into a task in a way mm-hmm. that we don't or can't. But if you want that sort of like upper level, like let's look at what the whole 360 effect of what we're doing is, you want somebody who's older, who's seen some things happen in the past, and they can make the connections and say, oh yeah, that's a good thing. We know about that, or that's a bad thing. Don't do that again.
Well, you're so right about that, because I think sometimes that we do ourselves a disservice by thinking that we have to learn everything that they know, right? Which I am a lifelong learner, so I love that. But I also think that there is something that I have a skill set that they don't have,
that's
right?
Correct.
And I think that that's where I really do enjoy that overlap and the intergenerational of working together, because I think that's when the most beautiful products come together, because you're not competing, you're contributing to the whole, and you really are seeing that more and more these days, and I find myself very encouraged by it.
Well, I think the idea of diversity, which is very much on everybody's mind these days, is also applies to age, right? Like you don't want a monoculture. Like I like people my age. I don't want to just hang out with people my age. It gets boring, right? Like, but bring in a teenager. Show me what's on your phone. How you talking
exactly.
to people. I've got we have people that are in their 20s that work here, and we have people much older. And it's really interesting. I spent some time a couple weekends ago with my mom, who's 91. Totally different mindset, totally different way of thinking or being, but like super interesting. So bringing all that into the conversation. And I think it's Friedman wrote about in the Times a little while ago about the idea of a monoculture is a really dangerous thing out in ecology, right? Like if you have a field and it's only one thing, that's awesome until something bad happens and you annihilate the field. So you want to have a lot of these different opinions and different kinds of people around you.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And by the way, these are the majority of the people that are doing the majority of the spending as well. If you look at it from an economic, standpoint, and you look at the, that better than anybody. And I think you've done several studies on that.
Yeah.
Talking about where the spending is actually coming from and is going to continue to come from for the next, several decades. We hope.
For better or worse, the wealth that's been accumulated with people over 50 is astonishing. And I think what maybe some people don't recognize are the areas of spending that happen. So that the biggest spender consumer group of Apple products are men over 65. Who would have thought?
Right.
They're probably buying a lot of it. I'm sure they're buying it for their kids and their grandkids and all that, but they're the ones that are doing it.
Sure, but that's certainly not who they're being, that they're being targeted to in those ads, right? But until maybe soon, maybe soon.
I think Apple takes a really great approach. They don't target people. They just make.
Yeah, you're right.
The Apple approach is we're just going to make the most awesome product we can, and you guys figure it out who wants it.
Here's what we got.
Yeah.
Let us know when you need a new one.
Exactly. They're very good at that.
We got an update.
Yeah, they're good at that.
Your podcast, let's talk about it.
Sure.
I know you get some interesting people to be able to talk about.
Yeah.
When can we hear it? How often is it on? And who do you have coming up?
So we drop the Super Age podcast drops every week. And Super Age is about how to live better for longer. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of, sort of big brain science people we have on. But we also have other people. We have people that are very interested in sound. This week we have Freddie Ravel on. Freddie used to play with Santana and Madonna and Earth, Wind, and Fire. And Freddie's very interested in some of the learning effects of sound. We have other people come on and they, if you send me something that seems like this is legit for my people to learn about, happy to have you on and have a discussion about it. Super Age and at AGEIST too. God bless Gwyneth, but we're not Goop. We don't do that. If you want us,
okay.
If you want to work with us,
we don't want you to.
You gotta, show me the studies. You gotta convince me that it works.
Right, but no, you're right about that because you want to come to a place where you know that the hard work's been done for you.
Yeah,
and then that's what you're doing. I mean, I don't want to go there and try to analyze it myself and figure it out and take in a whole bunch of it. You did the hard work for everybody, and it's nice. And what you've also done is give people hope. And that's you can't sell that. You've given people hope, and it's a beautiful thing because those stories are so encouraging and inspirational and make you want to do better.
If you want to. Not everybody wants to, Tamsen.
If you want to.
If you want to, this is how you do it. If you don't want to, that's okay too.
Everybody wants to feel good, though. I do think people want to feel good. So if we say about doing better, it could be just feeling good when they get up in the morning. So even if it's from here to here, whatever it is, I think that you're doing it, and it's very appreciated.
I like to feel good in the morning, and
I do too.
I intend to live a long time, and I try and be as healthy as I can.
I love it, David. I enjoy you. You're just you're the real deal, and that's nice to have.